Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Schroeder, the F-bomb coach. That's EF for executive function. Also, because sometimes I drop an F-bomb when I'm talking. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that affects all of us in both our professional and personal lives, and that is executive function. More specifically, we'll be looking at strategies to move from that feeling of overwhelm that we all have, especially if we're juggling families and jobs and a business. And we want to be able to move to having a clear overview of what needs to be done and how we can do it. So we're going to start with a quick definition. What is executive function? You may have heard this term a lot. If you've been around me, you've definitely heard me say it. But executive function is your brand's command center. It's a set of cognitive processes that allow you to plan, focus your attention, remember instructions, and juggle multiple tasks. These functions are primarily located in the prefrontal cortex of your brain, right in the front. It's interesting that executive function continues to develop not just in childhood, but all the way through your early adulthood. We used to think that by 2021, your prefrontal cortex was done. Now we know that it's much further along in your 20s, especially if you're neurodivergent. It just takes longer. But even if you're well past that age of 20s, which I am, the good news is that you could still strengthen these skills. Age doesn't matter for that. If you use the right approaches, you can strengthen those skills and you can improve them. Why does executive function matter so much? These skills affect pretty much everything we do. They determine how effectively we organize our tasks and manage our time. They influence our ability to make decisions, especially when we're faced with complex situations. They're crucial for adapting to change and pivoting when things aren't working the way we want them to. And maybe most visibly, they shape our ability to self-regulate and maintain focus when there's a gazillion distractions around. When our executive function is working well, these processes happen more smoothly. But when we have challenges, which many of us face, many people around here are all neurodivergent, we can experience a whole lot of frustration and diminished productivity. So we're going to look a little bit at how executive function challenges show up in professional settings. And we're going to examine each of these separately, not just what they look like, but what's actually happening in your brain when we experience them, because understanding the why behind them is the first step toward addressing them effectively. So we've got procrastination, prioritization paralysis, and task switching difficulties. We're going to start with procrastination, and most of us think we know what procrastination is. It just means not starting what we're supposed to be doing. Procrastination is a gap between knowing what needs to be done and actually starting it. And it's important to understand that procrastination isn't laziness. It isn't poor time management. For many people, it starts with executive dysfunction related to task initiation. That is the getting started, right? So when we procrastinate, we're oftentimes dealing with other things. We might be dealing with overwhelm, where you look at something and say, oh my God, where do I even start? It could be perfectionism. I can't start this until the conditions are ideal so that I can make it perfect. Or it could be task aversion. This feels uncomfortable, so I'll do something else. The tricky part about procrastination is that it creates a negative cycle. I think most of us have experienced this. We put something off, then we feel bad about putting it off. Then there's even more resistance starting because what the heck, I already screwed it all up. Breaking this cycle requires an understanding that it is an executive function issue, not a character flaw. And for many of you, you've been told that you're lazy or inconsiderate your whole lives, and you start to really hold on to that, and it makes it harder and harder to break that cycle. The second major challenge is prioritization paralysis. And you've all been told, just make a list. And for a lot of people, that falls flat. Executive function is more than just making a list, and most executive function strategies are really geared toward the neurotypical person. It falls flat for many of you because prioritization requires a bunch of different executive function skills to be working together. You need working memory to hold the different tasks in your head to be able to manipulate them. You have to do some planning to anticipate deadlines and dependencies. There's decision making to determine what's really important versus what's urgent. There's cognitive flexibility because you need that in order to adapt as circumstances change. When any of those components isn't working optimally, the result is a sense of paralysis. You stare at your list and you're still not sure where to begin. Or worse, you work frantically on all of the less important tasks while those crucial priorities slip by. It creates cascading effects of missed deadlines, increased stress, and a diminished confidence in your own abilities. The third challenge involves difficulties with task switching. We know that in today's world, we're expected to juggle multiple responsibilities, respond to constant interruptions. What many people don't realize is that each transition between tasks requires significant executive function resources. Research shows that context switching, moving your attention from one thing to another, can reduce your productivity by up to 40%. It's not just about feeling scattered, there's a real cognitive cost to this. And when we're constantly switching tasks, we enter another state of continuous partial attention. We never fully engage with any single task. And over time, this depletes our mental resources and contributes to fatigue and eventually burnout. Understanding this hidden cost is essential for creating more effective work patterns. So now that we understand the challenges, let's talk about some solutions. So I have the ORBIT method, and the ORBIT method helps you manage your executive function challenges. ORBIT stands for Organize Your Environment for Success, Regulate Your Energy Throughout the Day, Build in Transition Times Between Tasks, Implement External Accountability, and Track Progress Visually. This framework addresses the specific executive function challenges that we just discussed. Let's start with O. Organize your environment. Our surroundings have a profound impact on our executive function. A cluttered or distracting environment taxes our cognitive resources before we even begin a task. So you want to start by reducing visual and auditory distractions in your workspace. This might mean clearing your desk, use noise-canceling headphones, or working in a different location for certain tasks. Hobbies in one place, work in another, home admin kind of things in a different space. Consider creating different spaces for those types of work. Your brain will form associations between environments and activities so it can reduce the cognitive load of switching tasks because your brain's automatically going to associate this desk with this kind of work, this table with that kind of work. Keep frequently used items visible but organized. Out of sight for many of you means out of mind, and then you will totally forget you own something to be able to use it. And finally, use visual cues and reminders strategically. And for you that may be color coding project materials, it might be using sticky notes for reminders or a visual calendar where you could see the big picture. For all of these things, the important thing is you have to find what works for you. So when I say clear your workspace, it's clear it to the point that you're comfortable with it. If you look at your desktop and it's piles everywhere and it makes you uncomfortable, then you need to make a change. If you look at those piles and you're comfy with those piles, let them go. The R stands for regulate your energy. Executive function resources fluctuate throughout the day, and you need to work with those natural rhythms to improve your productivity. So you need to start by identifying your personal high and low energy periods. Are you a morning person or do you hit your stride in the afternoon? There's no one size fits all. The world is created around people who are supposed to start their days first thing in the morning and be ready to hit the ground running. That's not realistic for many of us. So once you know where your high energy is, you want to schedule your most demanding tasks during those peak hours. Save routine or less demanding tasks for when your energy naturally dips. You want to build in regular breaks. Methods like the Pomodoro method, where you work 25 minutes on focused work and then you follow by a 5-minute break, can be helpful. Don't get tied to Pomodoro being 25 on, 5 off. You still need to work with your individual energy levels. So it might be you're a 10 or 15-minute attention person. Work with it. 15 minutes of solid attention is way better than trying to push it through for 25. And if you're in a state of hyperfocus, you might go for 45. That's okay. Use that. Just don't push yourself to the point of burnout. And don't underestimate the importance of the physiological needs. It sounds silly, but we know that if we're tired, we're not going to be functioning at peak level. If we haven't eaten, we're going to be angry and hangry and we can't focus. So you should always start with, do I need one of these other things? Do I need to get up and move? Do I need to eat? Do I need some water? Some of you need that reminder all the time. The B is build in transition time. When we talked about the cognitive cost of task switching, this is what we need. We need to build in deliberate transitions to reduce that cost, the wasted time between moving from this task to this task. If we think we're just going to, I'm done with this at 10 o'clock, at 10:01, I'm starting the next thing, it's too much. Your brain is trying to juggle too much. But if you schedule buffer time between your activities, it gives your brain that break it needs to reset. So instead of back-to-back meetings, give yourself 10 or 15 minutes to process the information and prepare for the next thing. And if you can create simple transition rituals, and it could be, maybe some deep breathing, it could be just making a list of like, these are my key takeaways from the meeting that I was just in, reviewing what you have to do next, whatever next on your list, that could help. Next action technique can be helpful because right before you stop to take a break or move on to the next thing, you actually write down where you left off. Sounds simple because it is, but writing down where you need to pick up will help you next time you return to that project and you can know exactly what your next steps are. And that is documenting everything. Okay. So you write down and you say, okay, what am I doing next? Where am I leaving off? So that when you return to it, it's there. You don't have to think about it. You're not wasting that time resetting your brain to the right thing. I implement accountability. External structures can be game changers for a lot of people, especially neurodivergent people who struggle with executive function challenging. We've talked about body doubling, working alongside someone else. Co-working gives you that feeling. You don't have to be working on the same task. Someone could be sitting there reading a book while you're cleaning the kitchen. It's just about having an extra body there. Commitment devices are predetermined consequences or rewards to help you follow through. So it could be something financial, like booking a non-refundable appointment. It's going to make you do the thing, or social, or you're publicly committing to deadlines. Accountability partners, someone that will check in with you to check on your progress. They're going to nudge you in the right direction. Technology tools and timers can help you create structure. And you can use apps like Forest or Freedom, or just a timer like a Pomodoro timer on your computer. And then finally, clear deadlines and check-ins, whether it's with colleagues, supervisors, again, your accountability partner, actually having things written down that are going to hold you accountable. Again, those are the things, pick and choose the things that work for you, not try and do all of them. T is for tracked progress visually. Making progress visual helps with your motivation. And if you can see it, it's also going to reduce some of that cognitive load. So Kanban boards, whether they're physical sticky notes on the wall or a digital tool like Trello, it gives you like that visual of this is what I'm working on, this is where I'm going next, this is what I still have to do, this is what I've done. It lets you see all of the stages. Progress bars, just a little increased bar where you're maybe coloring it in. Being able to cross things off your list. That's a progress bar. That's another type of progress bar. Keeping completed tasks on a list, a done list. Because when your motivation is low and you're like, I'm not doing as nearly as much as I think I'm supposed to be doing, I should be able to do more. Look at what you actually have completed. It will give your brain that hit like, oh, I'm doing pretty good. Look at all these things that I did do. Time tracking helps you get a more accurate sense of how long things actually take. As human beings, we always underestimate how long things will take and overestimate how much we can get done in a day. So if you actually start to track some of that, you'll be able to estimate your time better and plan better. And visual project maps can help you maintain that big picture view. So that when you're working on all of the smaller individual tasks, you don't lose sight of the big picture of what you're working towards. So now that we know what the Orbit framework is, let's talk about implementation. The key here is to start small. You cannot do all of the things all at once. You will not accomplish much of anything. Choose just one technique from the Orbit framework, just one to implement immediately. So it could be body doubling or creating a Kanban board or scheduling the buffer time between tasks. Pick one thing to implement. And once you really get going with that first technique and you've made it work for you and it's habit, then you can build in another until that becomes habit and then build in another. It is a process. There is no quick fix. There is no, I'm going to make it all happen overnight. Just not going to happen. You have to measure your success by consistency, not perfection. So if you're using your technique 3 to 4 times a week, that's progress. You should be celebrating that, even if you're not using it every single time. There's no beating yourself up for not doing it perfectly all the time. And finally, you have to be willing to adjust your approaches based on the results. So when you see what you're doing and it kind of sort of works, but not quite, what tweaks can you make to make it work for you perfectly? And as we wrap up, I want to emphasize the most important point is to be compassionate with yourself. Executive function challenges are not character flaws. You are not lazy, stupid, or broken. These are all things that you've been told for a lot of your life, but you just have a brain that is wired differently. It does not mean that it is broken. So progress with these strategies is not going to be linear. It is going to go up and down and up and down. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. It's normal, it's expected. Different techniques work for different people, so you need to experiment to be able to see what works for you in what context, what works for you depending on your stress levels. The goal isn't to fix your brain, it's to manage your unique cognitive profile. What is going to work with your brain? Using the right strategies, you can improve your executive function, and that will not only improve your productivity, but it will also reduce your stress.